Welcome back to the 12 Days of Wellnessmas. Today, we are going through my journey with veganism. Hello, if you don't know me, my name is Nina. I am a certified life coach, and every day on this channel leading up to Christmas, I am posting a video around the topic of wellness. The other day, I posted a video all about my relationship with food as someone who has IBD. And in that video, I mentioned, how my veganism has played a role in my relationship with food and how it's also relevant to my relationship to my Crohn's disease. And I thought that topic might be worth diving in a little further, taking you through my journey through veganism, my relationship with veganism, and all the different stages with it that I've been through. And I want to be really honest about my relationship with veganism. I notice that when veganism gets talked about online, there can be a lot of trepidation around bringing up any criticisms from vegans because it is such an important movement. It already is a lifestyle that a lot of people have very strong negative feelings towards, and so it makes sense that as a vegan community, we tend to feel very protective about our lifestyle choices, and we don't want to give any rope to the people who have a vendetta against this lifestyle, especially because it's not just a personal lifestyle. It really is a social movement for the liberation of animals. And of course, we don't want to jeopardize that. But I think there is some danger around viewing things as completely black or white. And I never want to subscribe to the attitude that there is something wrong with bringing up not even just criticisms, but just pointing out the nuances of things. There is nuance to everything. And if we don't bring up nuance on our side, then I feel like we're only further perpetuating or giving fuel to the fire for the other side to view things as completely black or white. Not to jump into the deep end already, but that is a criticism that I have of the vegan community online in general, is that it all is made to feel like it is completely black or white, as in veganism good, everything else bad. Being vegan means following every single one of these things, and if you miss any single checkbox, you're not vegan. And if you're not vegan, then you hate animals and you are destroying the planet and blah, blah, blah. And I don't think that's a truth in the heart of many vegans, especially because the definition of veganism is basically doing your best, doing everything that is practical and possible not to harm or exploit animals. But I feel like the voices in the online community of veganism have been very loud and extreme, and unfortunately, like I said, perpetuated also loud and extreme commentary from people who are against veganism. That being said, I want to definitely highlight all of the amazing things that veganism has done for me in my life, and I want to make it clear that I am vegan, but I am in general sort of coming out of this phase of life where I have lived in a mindset that is generally very black and white. And in this sort of growth period for me, in this transition and healing process, really, it's made me reflect on my relationship with veganism, and it's made me change the way that I approach my veganism and view my veganism. But let's start with all of the reasons that I am vegan. Like I mentioned in my relationship with food and IBD video, veganism did so much for me in terms of my health, in terms of delaying the progression of a chronic autoimmune disease that was in the shadows most of my life and creeping up on me steadily in my teenage years. And because it did so much for my health by eliminating the chronic nausea that I experienced throughout my life and increasing my appetite in a way that made me enjoy food all the more, it of course improved my relationship with food. I, for most of my life, was pretty underweight in a way that wasn't necessarily very noticeable. It was only when I began eating a plant-based diet that I actually reached a healthy weight. It also improved my energy and improved a lot of more subtle, like, mental health things. Once I went vegan, I realized that, at least for me, anytime that I was eating like what was normal for me in my diet as an omnivore, just a regular old dose of animal products, I was engaging in a sort of suppression of something. I was engaging in a willful ignorance because, truthfully, if you're eating animal products and you're really thinking about where it comes from, it's something that will totally destroy your appetite, at least for most people. Maybe not the Liver King, but probably most people. And I felt a sort of subtle relief come over me in my relationship with food when I would sit down to eat when I started eating a plant-based diet, because I could sit there with my food and confidently say and know that this food wasn't at the expense of a life. I wasn't eating a dead body. And that gave me a whole lot of peace. Not necessarily that when I was eating animal products, I was like wrapped with guilt and like disgust as I was eating those animal products. But for me, at least, maybe just like as a highly sensitive person, there was a noticeable difference from having to shut off my brain and disassociate myself from what I was eating and being able to have that peace and that relief that my food wasn't at the direct consequence of animal suffering. In general, that transition into veganism motivated me to become much more conscious around nutrition, much more conscious about food, the behind the scenes of food. And that was a really empowering thing for me. It was something that made engaging with my food feel much better, much more intentional. A sort of like underrated perk, in my opinion, of being vegan is that it really limits decision fatigue, because there are not that many options necessarily, at least when going out to eat at a regular restaurant or choosing what restaurant to go to. There isn't as much like stress or even like FOMO of what dish are you going to choose to order. Maybe that's not something that everyone can relate to, but I felt like that was a perk as well for me. But outside of those like self-oriented perks that I experienced going vegan, there's also obviously the huge social, environmental side of it all, of being part of a movement to decrease the amount of animal cruelty in this world, to not participate as much as possible in the exploitation of animals. But now, getting sort of into the darker side of my journey with veganism, I would be lying if I said that part of my motivation for going vegan didn't come from a place of restrictiveness. What even got the concept of veganism or a plant-based diet on my radar to begin with was the fact that at the time, at 19 years old, I was in a relationship with someone who was extremely critical of my body and my appearance, and very vocally judgmental of my diet. I was in my first year of college. Everyone knows that that is definitely not the peak of health in anyone's life. I was being introduced to things like In-N-Out and Chick-fil-A for the first time in my life, and I was enjoying having this freedom of being able to eat at such places. I was a student with a limited amount of time, and I was getting a lot of Trader Joe's frozen meals, whatever, and still throughout this whole time I was underweight. Even with all of the freshman 15 lifestyle changes, I did not gain the freshman 15, not even close. But even so, I had this voice in my ear, this external voice in my ear, tearing me down about my body, about my appearance in general, about my life diet choices. And it was enough of a motivator for me to feel like I should do something to change all of that. And it's sad. It's not like the most empowering story of transitioning to veganism. I always was a lover of animals. The most Catholic thing that I did in my life was that every year I would give up meat for Lent. I'd always wanted to be a vegetarian for the sake of the animals, but it never ended up working out for me because it was like not really a change that my parents were willing to take on. Yes, in part, I was like, oh, veganism is something that helps the animals. And I do care about animals. But also, I thought, wow, what an not easy way, but maybe I felt like it was an easy way because it was a concrete way. It was a hard line in the sand, a strict rule that I could follow that would keep me away from In-N-Out, that would keep me away from Chick-fil-A, that would give me some guidance on what to eat outside of pre-packaged frozen Trader Joe's things. It was a guiding light. It was a path paved with control. That part of it was appealing to me. Now, actually, surprisingly, once I became vegan, I didn't find that it was very restrictive at all. It was a bit restrictive when over the summer at my family home, I didn't have the full freedom to cook my own meals or do the grocery shopping, but living on my own out in Los Angeles, a very vegan-friendly city, and also the opportunity to eat at the one, the only, the holy Veggie Grill, I didn't feel restricted at all. But even if I was eating a black bean burger at Veggie Grill, because this was before the time of Beyond and Impossible, I felt good. I felt like I was helping the animals and I wasn't making the worst choice that I could make if I was searching for some sort of comfort food. The most challenging part of making that transition into veganism was the social backlash from people who were very unsupportive of me making this decision. And also just like as you learn more about veganism and you open up your eyes and really sink into the reality of the animal product industry, it breeds a sort of indignation in you, and it can make you all the more frustrated with people. And it really affected my relationships because I found myself being judgmental towards my friends in a way that I wouldn't have been before. As a person at my core, I really do not have much of an us versus them mentality. I don't consider myself to be a very judgmental person at all, sometimes even to a fault, where I let in the wrong people because I'm not discerning enough. But it's not a quality that I enjoy much in other people either, people who are very judgmental towards other people, people who have a very us versus them mentality. It's not something that I enjoy, but it's a quality that for that early period of time in my transition into veganism, I very much embodied. And it didn't feel good, at least just for me, because it didn't really align with the core of who I believe myself to be. But that was an issue that sort of ended up fading out. Definitely not, people having judgments and opinions on the whole situation and wanting to debate with you about your lifestyle choices. That still pops up no matter how many years down the line you are into your journey with veganism. But the intensity of that indignation and that really harsh judgment that I found myself projecting onto people definitely simmered down, and very much to my benefit as well. I find that it is incredibly valuable to hear people's perspectives and be open-minded without letting your biases or your preconceived notions get in the way. That's what made my experience my first time around on Jubilee with that middle ground of hunters versus vegans so cool for me. I really enjoyed that experience until it got posted on YouTube, and then the audience of Jubilee proved to not be the nicest of people, to say the least. Now, after getting over the first sort of transition period into veganism, all of the social challenges, all of the internal things that it ignited in me that I had to face, I had a very stable relationship with my veganism. I sort of found that point of balance within myself where I felt true to myself in the way that I was approaching veganism. One thing is that my experience, at least with being vegan, was that I felt constantly reminded about how I just could never be enough. You're not doing enough if you're not a vegan activist, and you're not doing enough if you're not only eating a plant-based diet and avoiding animal products, but you're also only supporting ethical and sustainable clothing, and you're engaging in these debates with people to make them change their mind and go vegan as well. And that can be sort of a really stressful experience where you think that at first you're doing this great thing for yourself, for your health, for the planet, for social justice, but once you're folded into the community, what you consistently hear is how you're not doing enough. It's not just enough to eat plant-based. You also want to eat exclusively whole foods. And actually, you also want to have a completely raw vegan diet and eat 17 bananas a day and not have your first meal until 4 p.m. or something, whatever. There's always the next best thing, which truthfully might not be the best thing at all. I became a vegan at the time that Freely, the banana girl, was at the top of the pyramid. It might have been the height of her career, I don't know, but she was big. But even despite sort of this general underlying message that I was never doing enough as a vegan, I came to a sense of peace with how I was approaching veganism. Probably especially around the pandemic, when I just began to look further into myself, spend more time with myself, and became more, emboldened to make decisions and craft my identity based off of what I was learning about myself, what I felt to be true about myself, and less from how other people around me were influencing me, right? I found peace, with the thought, with the knowledge that this kind of activism is not where I feel comfortable. And other people who are out there doing the damn thing, it's because this is their strength, and it's okay if it's not my strength. Now, there came a point where I needed to reevaluate my relationship with veganism when I became ill. Crohn's disease is an autoimmune illness that affects the digestive system. And so obviously something that's going to get brought up or have attention brought to is your diet when you are dealing with digestive issues, even if, in my case, the source of the issue wasn't my diet at all. It seems like once you develop a chronic illness, everyone seems to have an opinion. Everyone seems to magically manifest a medical degree. I received so much unsolicited advice. And a lot of people were telling me that I had to change my diet. I had to go back to eating animal products. And that was a decision that I ultimately ended up not making. It didn't feel like the right decision for me at all whatsoever. But interestingly, my Crohn's diagnosis ended up having an effect on my relationship with veganism in a more roundabout way, because my Crohn's diagnosis ended up making me have to reevaluate a lot of things that ended up falling down the domino line until it eventually hit veganism. As I got ill, it impacted my ability to work in entertainment, to pursue a larger career in entertainment, which was what I was out in Los Angeles for. So it led me to relocate. It led me to reevaluate the relationship that I was in, because it really shows a lot about a person, how they react to you becoming ill, especially if that involves you needing to put yourself first in some instances and not put them first in every instance of your goddamn relationship. And getting out of that relationship, I then began to grapple with this paradigm that I had been living with that was, if not further fueled by veganism, then definitely like very closely parallel to my relationship with veganism, which was this whole idea that I had to put myself last with everything. The values, the characteristics that were encouraged in me, and what I found early on in my life that I was very good at was taking care of other people, being a nurturer, being a helper, like 2 Enneagram sort of stuff, if that gives you a mental image. And as someone who is very highly sensitive, it became a natural impulse for me to take care of other people, to make sure that other people were okay, because first and foremost, I need my environment to be harmonious and stable for me to feel harmonious and stable. That was the direction that I had somehow just subconsciously decided to go with, taking care of everyone around me, making sure that everything around me was in order and safe and in place and at peace, so that then I could feel that way, instead of putting up a boundary of protecting my peace and taking care of myself first and foremost. And after filling my cup and making sure that I was in a good place, that I was okay, then utilizing my skills, my natural knack of being nurturing and caretaking and helpful towards others. And at this point, you might be thinking like, cool, thanks for the insight into your personality, but what does this have to do with your journey with veganism? Well, I feel like veganism further enforced that quality in me, because veganism can really be all about martyring yourself in a way, making these sacrifices, putting yourself into uncomfortable positions. You're not doing enough if you're not doing the most to take on this huge responsibility of ending animal cruelty and exploitation. There can be a lot of this rhetoric in the vegan community of like, oh, so you're happy to see animals suffer and die so that you can just have your little creature comforts like a glass of milk in the morning. Or like you need to put yourself out there. You need to go out and fight the good fight because these animals are voiceless. They can't do anything without you going out there and championing for them. Or like, oh, you think that it sucks so bad because there's nothing for you to eat when you go out to dinner with your in-laws? Well, how do you think it feels like to be hung up by your feet and have your throat slit so that other people can eat your body? It can be sort of aggressive like that. It has this undertone of like, don't be selfish. Sacrifice your comforts. Sacrifice your needs and yourself for the sake of this bigger cause. And listen, there is 100% validity to all of that. Like all of those statements are like points to be made. But for me, it just so happened to be that this was all playing upon a quality of mine that at the end of the day was proving to be very unhealthy for me in my life, in my relationships, in my work-life balance. It was a mindset that I was absorbing without any nuance, and it was permeating all aspects of my life. And so when I went through the process of sort of confronting that part of my personality and changing that paradigm, healing that paradigm, it made me look at my relationship with veganism ever so slightly differently. So at this point in my journey with veganism, where am I now? Truthfully, it's like not that different. I'm vegan. I don't eat animal products. I don't buy animal products of any kind. Like, truthfully, I don't think I could if I tried to eat animals. The association is just like unbreakable at this point. But I'm sort of like at the place where I'm giving myself more just like grace if I slip up. Even just like giving myself the mental permission of like, hey, if anything were to happen, just know, just remember that it's okay to put yourself above this cause if it is a matter of your health or your well-being in any way. I was just like way too black and white around the whole thing. Like when I went to India, I didn't take the rabies vaccine because it was made up of animal products. Like that's how committed I was to the cause. And luckily I didn't get rabies. And part of like that whole decision making process also had to do with the fact that I thought that I was young and invincible. But that's sort of the mindset that I'm trying to move myself out of. And also the psychological practice of not seeing things so black or white that has sort of started to permeate into my thought process around veganism. More than likely, I am making like way more of a big deal about this than most people ever would, but I am actively fighting with very strong voices, narratives, paradigms in my head telling me that I am basically like not worth it, that I come below everything else and every other single person, animal, living being's needs. And if having just a spoonful of honey and a cup of tea is something that helps me shift that narrative a little bit, then that's my business. That's not going to be the make or break factor of whether we save the bees or not. There's also probably a whole conversation to be had about like corporate responsibility versus individual responsibility. It's such a systemic issue that we are not the make it or break it factor. But that's my little talk today on my journey with veganism. I would love to know if you are a vegan, if you have been a vegan at any point in your life, or even if you're not a vegan, what you think of this video, what do you think of my thoughts and my experiences. Definitely would love to know if you relate in some form or another. A good video to go along with this, to give more information about me and my relationship with diet, would be this one about my relationship with food with IBD. This video wasn't really about coaching, but as always, there's a link to my website in the description, ninabcoaching.com, where you can book a free 15-minute coaching consultation if you're interested in hiring me as a life coach. But that's all that I have for you for today. I'll see you tomorrow for the next day of Wellnessmas. Thanks for watching. Bye.